Well, Delta Property achieved a maiden full-year distribution of 23 cents. The group, which listed on the JSE in November last year, raised 980 million rand in equity. The property group has investments of 2.1 billion rand with occupancy of 95.6% across the portfolio. The company's CEO, Sandile Nomvete, joins us now to unpack the numbers. Thanks so much, Sandile, for joining us this morning. Well, a very interesting period for the company. Take us through the period that was, because certainly one of the highlights has been occupancy levels, and you've managed to maintain that at close to 96%.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Morning, David. Yeah, I think it's been a very rapid 4 months since we've listed, and I think we went through a very successful listing where we raised 980 million. Of course, as you've already mentioned today, we announced our maiden results, and we're quite pleased with the fact that they were on budget as forecast at listing date, and the deal flow has also been quite hectic for management at this particular stage, where we also have this morning announced the closure of a rights issue of 1 billion rand, which was oversubscribed, to allow Delta to basically grow from 20 assets that we took at listing to 45 assets overall.
So, Sandile, it seems like yesterday that you were in here talking about the listing.
Agreed.
And there was all that excitement on the exchange when you got going. It's a few months. One of the aspects of the company that was interesting when you came in and talked to us was that a lot of it is government tenants. The government is a tenant in a lot of your buildings, which means secure income and long leases.
Yes.
However, it probably means steady income and not much growth. So it was the rights issue aimed at diversifying.
Look, Dave, I think it was a bit of both. We have bought more government, and I think maybe just to touch on Alicia's question earlier, it speaks to the sustainability in government. Government tends to be in buildings for longer term, so the vacancies, they're very, very stable in the manner that they lease office space. So the vacancies that are there are very strategic, and it's potentially some value uptick for unit holders. And I think we're quite pleased with what we are currently offering investors at the moment. At the moment, we are involved also with about 65 million rands worth of capex that we're pumping into these properties, obviously from a defensive mechanism perspective, to make sure that some of these older CBD buildings are re-rated in terms of from B to A grade or C to B grade buildings, of course.
So you're happy with the kind of exposure you have in terms of who you're targeting as a client right now, and no reason you see for diversifying that moving forward?
I think we're quite happy with the sovereign underpin. I think for us, we actually look at the government lease space as similar to a government bond underpinned by property. So it's very, very stable, it's very secure. The team has worked very, very hard to make sure that our bad debts are in control.
Are you saying that they're bad debts with government? I mean, because in other sectors of the economy, there are people, construction, for example, which complain about not being paid.
I'm quite pleased to say, Dave, that actually, for some reason, the property space within government tends to be the one area where definitely we've collected all our rentals on time, and we've had absolutely no problems. I'm not saying it's easy, but it definitely does take, we as Delta are geared towards dealing with government. We have been in the sector, for 14 years now, so we actually understand, the periods of where they have to look internally from an audit perspective and things like that.
Of course, it's that understanding that you take to the negotiating table as well. So let's take a look at how tough those negotiations are becoming when it comes to rental contracts in the first place.
Alicia, I think that's actually a very good question, because you would have seen from our expiry profile that we do have a couple of leases coming up in 2014. And we have seen some pushback in terms of the rental that we can charge, but I think given that we have dominant properties in CBDs, one of the defensive mechanisms that Delta has approached the sector, as we came to market with an average property value of 100 million rand per property, With the recently announced acquisitions, that drops slightly to about 95 million rand per property. For us, we believe that that holds us in good stead because it makes it more difficult for our tenants to move elsewhere. But certainly, from an escalation perspective, we see that, in a range bound between 8 and 10%. But we were very comfortable at 8% escalations.
If there's a market in government property and government occupation, how much of that market do you have? If we're looking at the major provincial capitals, for example, are there areas where you could go in and compete with equivalent property companies who at the moment look after the government? I mean, what's your competitive edge there?
Dave, I think we've been very strategic in the areas that we've targeted our acquisitions. Pretoria definitely is a big source of government departments, and we think that we've reached a point where we can be very, very competitive in the Pretoria CBD. Durban CBD is an area where I think I'm proud to say that we're in a dominant position. Yes, some other funds have probably pulled back, but we have spent a lot of capex in our properties, particularly in the Durban CBD, to make sure that we basically maintain that competitive advantage.